everyone. I'm Elena Armijo, and I'm the founder of the C-Suite Collective. This is a company I created for executive leadership coaching and wellness that supports C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and founders. Now, more than ever, businesses are running faster and with fewer resources. Burnout, overwhelm, disconnection, and disillusionment are the new norm for teams struggling with an old paradigm. At the C-Suite Collective, we believe deeply that providing massive support for your teams through executive coaching and holistic practices will create an inclusive culture, higher levels of performance, sustainable change, and the organizational impact you desire. You can find us at the c-suitecollective.com.
What are some helpful tips to remember regarding empathy? We're going to get into this today after our episode. Our guest today is Mimi Nicklin, who is an internationally best-selling author and a multi-award-winning founder of the world's widest-reaching empathy training and engagement platform. Get this, she has a goal of reconnecting 1 million people to empathy everywhere, and she's really close to reaching it. We had a great conversation about empathy and all of the reasons why this is so important in our world right now. So I hope you enjoy the episode today, and remember that something powerful resides within you, and I'm here to support you in seeing it and creating it. So what are some helpful tips to remember regarding empathy? All right, 3 tips. I think they're really important. Empathy is not agreement, it's attunement. So as leaders, we often think that we need to fix or agree in order to empathize. I know I certainly do. Like if I fix your problem, then I'm in it with you, or I'm able to show you that I'm empathetic. But in reality, empathy is meeting someone in their experience without judgment or agenda. That's really hard, right? Just meeting them where they are. So practice asking the other person, what's it like for you right now? Instead of jumping in to solve. This builds trust and psychological safety, but it allows you to just be with the person. And this is essential for any high-performing culture. So, reminder, tip number 1, empathy is not agreement, it's attunement. Tip number 2, that empathy without boundaries leads to burnout. So, a lot of what you're going to hear us talk about on this podcast with Mimi is that empathy is a skill. It's not something that you just come by naturally, and it's certainly not an emotional sponge. So in coaching and leadership, I teach clients to locate empathy in the body. It's a little bit of a practice of just notice it, but don't absorb it. You can witness someone's experience and still stay rooted in your own. This is how we can model emotional responsibility, but create spaciousness for real change. So empathy without boundaries, burnout city. Empathy is a performance amplifier. That's number 3, okay? The research is really clear, and I love that Mimi talks about this on the podcast today. She's going to share with you so much research that she has gathered over the years, but even recent data that's coming up. Teams with empathic leaders are more innovative, resilient, and engaged. When we practice resonance and connection with others, which really means, are you really hearing people? And are you really sitting with them in curiosity? We activate deeper alignment and results. So there's all kinds of ways you can do this through your voice, through your breath, listening, presence, simply just being with the person. It's not soft, it's strategic in letting your empathy resonate enough that it amplifies what the other person is saying, and therefore creates connection. Hey, Mimi, thank you so much for being here today. I am very excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Honestly, I can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I always like to share a little bit about the first time I meet someone. And you and I have met each other one time before. Your beautiful team reached out to my team and said, Mimi would like to share her voice in the podcast. So first of all, thank you for your team for reaching out. But the thing that I wanted to acknowledge you for the moment that I met you was your grace and your warm presence.
Thank you.
Really just the warmth that exuded across the screen, especially being across the world. So thank you so much for being here. And I guess we'll start. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you became a coach and how you became interested in the work that you're doing in the world.
So, well, thank you. And you're right. We are very far apart. I think we're 15 hours apart. So
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that we found each other in this world. Oh gosh, tell you about my work. So I was actually in marketing for the majority of my life, my corporate life, actually advertising, the advertising side of marketing, which was a huge passion for me and was what I always wanted to do. It's what my dad had done, and I always wanted to be like him. So I followed in those footsteps, and I had a very corporate career for about 15 or 16 years. And then in 2018, one of the roles that I took on involved me taking on a business that was very challenging and a real kind of departure from the work that I had done before. And actually my kind of, I don't know, direction change started with a coach, because at that time I took over this business, which was nearly bankrupt. I mean, really in a difficult place. And I went to see a coach. I was in a new city to ask her for some advice. And I had no concept of coaching at all. I don't think I had ever come across a coach until that minute,
Yeah.
And I really went just for some advice on how I might approach this huge challenge that was overwhelming me. And in that meeting, she was asking me, about the reality I was facing and the leadership style that I had. And one of the things she asked me was how was I planning on leading through that experience? And at the time, I was talking about intuition. And she asked me a question about that actually, Elena, in the end changed my life, because she said, is it intuition that you're using, or is it empathy? And I remember thinking, no, it's not empathy. Like, what's empathy got to do with leadership, which feels so strange now, because now I talk about empathy, every minute of every hour of every day. But it was just not something I had ever considered before. So fundamentally, when I left that session with this fantastic woman, I went and researched empathy, and I found something called the empathy deficit, which is the lack of connectivity in our world, the lack of understanding in our world. And really, that did change the course of my work, my life, my purpose. Everything changed. I mean, not immediately, but from that point, I started to write. I wrote my first book. I had my first podcast. And I just felt that I had discovered this huge reality for our world, this huge deficit, this huge problem, actually, that no one was talking about, because nobody was talking about this in 2018. And that was where the journey began, really.
Wow. I love that question. It's so pointed around intuition versus empathy. And if you were to describe the difference today, what would you say the difference is between that now for you?
Yeah. So I believe deeply in intuition, and I use it a lot, but I do think it is very distinct from what empathy is. So I think intuition is an emotion or a feeling, right? Something you can normally feel, you can't see off the camera, but kind of for me, like between my rib cage, like that. People talk about like a feeling in your stomach or a feeling in your heart, right? That feeling, like an energy, really. Whereas empathy is a skill set, and that's probably most of my work is teaching people this, which is that empathy is a skill set. It's built into your prefrontal cortex in your brain. We are all born with it, all except a very small portion of the population. When we're born, we are born with this skill set. It's a pro-social skill set, and it enables us to connect to societies and communities. So fundamentally, one is a feeling or an emotion, and the other is a skill set. And that would be the same when you talk about things like sympathy or kindness, beautiful emotions, but not skill sets. And I think that's a key difference with what we're teaching in this space.
I love that. Some of the research I've done around empathy has been really only the past 5 years in my profession. So, working directly with Brene Brown and her big arena with empathy in the US. So I love hearing people that were from 2018 talking about this research in the rest of the world. So tell me a little bit about your belief system. I know when we were first chatting, you had this beautiful mission and vision for the world. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about what your vision is and what you're leading with talking about empathy in the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I believe, I know this is a skill set, and there's a huge deficit of it. And when we don't have empathy, Elena, we don't do very well as human beings. Fundamentally, when empathy declines, all of the isms, whether that's ageism, racism, nationalism, sexism, it doesn't matter, any ism, goes up, right? So what that's showing us is that as understanding goes down, segregation, isolation, disconnection increase. And as I touched on very briefly just now, we are a pro-social skills species. This is a pro-social skill set, right? We need this as people, not just to thrive, but to survive, right? We need it as a human race. So it's a critical skill for us all to be using. And my vision really is to try and reconnect 1 million people by 2028 by propagating this, really. So, I get up every day and create some form of content that educates around empathy, whether that is a keynote or a workshop or a podcast, thank you, or a video or I don't know, a carousel on Instagram, like anything. Any form of conversation, information, or inspiration that reaches people, that talks about why we need the skill set and what it is, because it is so desperately needed. We've actually lost 48% of it in the last 38 years. And
Wow.
yeah, right. When you realize that this is, as I said, a skill set that keeps us alive, and then we've lost so much of it, in the last 30 years or so, you start to realize what a huge problem this is for us as human beings. So you're right, it is a passion for me. It's a great passion. Today it has become my work as well, but this really started off as a mission, and today I get to travel the world and do it every day.
How beautiful. Well, now I'm super curious. What do you think is causing the decline in empathy? I love that number and that stat. It highlights the need, just like you're saying, and this is not this is a mandatory conversation, right? It puts it into that category versus a nice conversation to have. So what do you think is causing the decline?
I mean, I think there are many things. If I had to sort of summarize it, I'd say modern life. I think I think the first thing is that as a skill set, any skill that you have in life, if you don't practice it, you start to lose it, right? So you used to sing, right? So when you sing less, your skill becomes less perfect, right? Until you get back into it. It's like riding a bike, actually. When you're riding a bike all the time, it's super easy. But if you don't ride a bike for 10 years, you get back on it and you're all wobbly, So I think that the first sort of macro part there is that this is a skill set, and because we haven't been using it, because of lots of the modern life realities, urbanization, relocation, high stress levels, low time, right, the speed of life that we're working within, we become less practiced, and the less practice we have, right? And actually the last 3 words of my first book were practice creates permanence, right? Not perfection, right? In the Western world, we have a phrase that says practice makes perfect. And I always say to my audiences, don't aim for perfect, right? This is not the point. We're not aiming for perfect, but we are aiming for permanence of that ability to see people in your everyday life. How often you go into, I don't know, a coffee shop and order your coffee and maybe you say good morning, but do you actually literally even see the person that serves you your coffee? Probably not. Most people aren't connecting with anybody in their day. So it's a skill set that we're out of practice. As I touched on very briefly there, I think empathy has 2 great enemies. One is high stress and the other is low time. And we have too much of both, right? We don't have enough time and we have too much stress. And that is actually from neuroscience, right? When the brain is under pressure, the way it responds is called the fight or flight response, but the way it responds is by moving energy, blood away from the parts of the brain that we use to have empathy. So there are also real neurological, physiological realities behind this high stress, burnout, bonkers culture that we've created for ourselves.
Yes.
And our ability to empathize.
Oh my gosh. I love the science behind all of this. So we'll definitely be linking everybody to you to go find that research and that science, because it's fascinating when you have the research side by side. Yeah. And what I'm hearing is some of the ways you could practice is thinking about this as your normal things that you practice every day in your life. Like if you have a workout routine, or if you eat a certain way, or if you have a morning routine, these are some ways that you could implement it as a skill set to practice.
Yeah. I think you just have to be very intentional about it. When I teach in the corporate world, I have like a three-step. It's not really a model, but I guess like a three-step model.
Cool.
The first is around awareness, which is exactly what we're doing now, right? Just being aware of what empathy is and why we need it. But the
Mm-hmm.
second, and this is what you're talking about, really is intention.
Mm-hmm.
You have to intentionally use this. The great thing is, again, back to skills and practicing, the more intentional you are, the easier it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
The third step for interest is around accountability and measurement. But in that intentional piece, it is, especially if you want to become more empathetic in your life, it is about going into those days to say, I want to understand more people. I want to connect with more people in my day. It's very easy to leave your house on your phone and get on the bus on your phone and get your coffee on your phone and, literally never leave your screen,
Yes.
and never actually connect with anyone around you, but you're missing out on so much of the world.
Yeah. And connection, right? Humanity is built in connection. So even
We
that.
need each other, actually. And the good thing is, when sometimes people who are slightly, I don't know, less open to some of these concepts, they think that empathy is all about other people. And of course, a lot of it is about other people. But back to your point about loving the science, what we also know from neuroscience is that the more you connect with other people, so the more empathy you use with other people, the more joy you feel. So we evolved in that way. Our brains evolved in such a way that it would be rewarding for us to connect with others, because of course, as evolutionary beings, we knew we needed that, and we also knew what barriers would be in place. So we've actually evolved in a way that makes it rewarding, makes it joyful, creates oxytocin in the body, the happy hormone people call it, when you empathize with others, when you connect with others. So it will make other people feel better, do better, live better, but it will also do that for you.
Yeah, which is very enrolling, right? Because we know as humans, we do stuff because in the world because we get something from it, but also it serves other people as a collective
Yeah,
mindset. That's
yeah,
great.
absolutely.
What is an example of a story or a time where empathy really changed something for you? It strikes me you probably have a lot of stories or examples of this in your life around
Yeah.
where empathy was used or missed, maybe as an example of a missed opportunity that you could share with us.
The one that comes to mind, and it's very early where I am in the world, so my brain is still like waking up. But this is the one that first came to my mind, which was, and it happened in October last year, so not that long ago. Although we're already in June,
I
where,
know. It's going by so fast.
where
So
did
feel
half a
that.
year go?
Where did it
Anyway,
go?
so in October last year, I was at an event. I do a lot of work on stage. That's my sort of primary passion. And in this story, I was in between being on stage. So I had about a 20-minute gap. And for the listener to kind of imagine, this was a stage I don't know, in the Americas, but on this side of the world, we would call it like a trade show, in that
No.
there are stages, yeah, right, amongst all
Mhm.
the stands where people are selling their products and stuff. This was a tech conference, so lots of software providers and tech companies. And so just outside the stage that I was on in this huge hall, in fact, it was at a fair called GITEX, which is actually the world's largest tech fair now. So it's this huge space. And next to the stage was a coffee stall. And now this coffee stall was I didn't know this, but a very special Japanese coffee stall, probably the most expensive coffee you're ever going to buy in your life, certainly in a trade show. Anyway, so I leave the stage to get in the line to get my coffee in the 20-minute gap that I have. And I don't know, probably on my phone, catching up on things, trying to do everything I can do in this break I have between stage. And I get to the front and I say to the guy, "Good morning, how are you? Can I please have a latte?" And as I say it, something happened. I don't know, the machine broke or he spilled something, or so he kind of moved, sort of said, "Okay, I'm coming," and moved away. And then by the time he got back to me and kind of made eye contact, I looked at my watch and I was like, "I'm really sorry, I'll be back later." Right? I had run out of time,
Time.
and then
Yeah.
I left and I went back to the stage, and it was really next door. I went back and did my job, and then as I came off from the next panel discussion, that was what I was running back to. I was standing and my back to the audience, sort of on the side, and I was looking at the stage that I had just come off. And these coffee cups were turquoise color. I remember they were beautiful. They were like bright, like Tiffany's boxes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were lovely. And I saw this cup like come in, from my peripheral vision. And I just heard someone say, I heard that somebody needed a latte. And I looked up and I didn't know this man. I didn't know who he was, but he had been standing behind me in the line. And so he had heard me order this latte, which I then didn't get to buy. And he bought it for me, right? And then he waited with the coffee in the break until I came off the stage and then came and gifted it to me. And I love that as a really simple, everyday example of empathy, because we can get very wrapped up in, empathetic cultural change at Microsoft, right? These huge stories of organizational transformation. Or you can just think about being human, right? And the fact that this man stood behind me in the line, he knew exactly who I was because probably he'd been in the audience. And he'd watch me, stand patiently for my entire break and then just say, oh, no problem at all. I will come back in the next one. Heard my order, noticed the order, and then thought, you know what? I think she probably really needs a coffee. Bought it, waited for me, and then gave it to me, And the amazing thing about that story is that, and I'll probably find this clip and give it to him, because all these months later, we are now friends, I guess like business friends. We've done projects together, we talk often. And so that act of empathy not only was a wonderful human moment in the moment, but it literally sparked connection. We then became really friendly. And as I said, we've done work together. We've done a subsequent event together. So he then, a few months later, ended up inviting me to a business psychology event. So I love that story. I feel like I'm never going to forget it, especially because of the color of the cup. I think if it had just been like a Starbucks cup, the story wouldn't be as visual, but this beautiful turquoise cup that just appeared in my life. So that's a story, Elena. I don't know if that fills your brief, but it certainly is something that sticks with me.
Yeah, well, and it's so visceral, right? That those are the moments that you can pin into as an example to model for yourself. And I imagine, in the States, we like to say, buy a cup of coffee, give a cup of coffee. There's lots of stories of people paying it forward. And it just reminds me of the possibility when people are open and listening for an opportunity to be empathetic.
Yeah, and I think, now that we're talking about it, Elena, it's those acts can be so simple. And another one comes to mind just in your response, because you said then, being open to listening. I think you said for signs or listening for moments.
Yeah, right? For the moments.
And just last week, I was at another big event. And this is a very different moment of empathy, but it's still a moment of empathy in that I had done my keynote in the morning, and in the afternoon, I got to meet lots of amazing people. I was in Sri Lanka, so in Asia. And this lady, I could tell, she was a very senior, well put together woman, came up to me and sort of held my arm and said, Mimi, I want to give you some unsolicited advice. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. And it was lovely advice. She went on to give me some beautiful feedback and things that she thinks I should do. And I said to her, well, I never thought of doing that. And she said, that's why it's unsolicited. And I was like, okay. But in her advice, that was also an act of empathy, because to your point, she had listened to me. She had been open to really hearing what I was saying and looking at me as a complete stranger, a strange woman, on a stage, and connecting those dots and saying, if I get the opportunity today, I want to give her this advice, this gift, because I think it will help her, right? I think it will help her. And in so doing, maybe it will help others too. So those acts of empathy can be something physical, like, you said, buying a coffee and passing it on. It can be as simple as listening to someone. So the backbone of all empathy is listening. So it could be in coaching or listening to people in the workplace, building relationships in your team. Or it could be something like this lady was doing, which is that listening to a reality, listening to a context, and then being able to share a perspective on that might help others. So there are so many ways, Elena, right? There's so many ways that we can empathize with other people.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, now I'm curious. You mentioned there's 3 steps that you teach in corporate trainings. What's the third step?
So the third step is accountability or measurement. Because as humans, if we don't have structure, if we don't have measurement, we don't tend to do very well. We don't tend to uphold behaviors and consistencies. Even you mentioned earlier, like morning routines or food routines or, healthy lifestyle routines. even with those, we do better when we have some type of accountability, or, there's an app measuring us, or,
Yeah.
we're trying to lose weight, so we're looking at a scale or whatever it is, there's some level of measurement. So when I'm working with corporates, I always say to these HR leaders who tend to be my clients, if you don't measure this, it won't manifest, because people will see it as something that you're just talking about. You have to build this into value systems, or into your culture, or in many organizations into your KPIs, right? Your key performance indicators. You have to tell people that they are being measured on this. That this is, like you said earlier, this is not optional, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
So it's a very important step. And of course you can have that in your life as well. Many of my sort of workshops, I will say to the people that come, try and find a way to assess how many people you connect with each day. Maybe it's just one new person, and do it for 7 days. And often now people write to me on Instagram and they say, "Hey Mimi, I was in your masterclass and I want to tell you that I connected with 7 people in 7 days. And, this is what happened. And I told my boyfriend to do it, and this is what he did." And it's just that little ripple of accountability, of having like a challenge or a goal to stick to, that enables you to experience it. And once you experience it, you're like, "Oh, this is really nice. I really like connecting with people. It's really nice to talk to the person that, I don't know, sells me a ticket on the bus." They probably don't do that anymore because they probably have like an app. But if they did. So yes, accountability is a really important part, both in our personal lives and at work as well.
Love it. Well, and that makes me think that there's so many different ways to be accountable. And I'm really curious about the naysayers. So a lot of what we're seeing in organizational work in the US can sometimes be a tough gradient. I'll say, for some people to wrap their heads around empathy, or why it's important, or the ROI, like we've spoken about a little bit here. So for your tough people, and I'm going to say people that are maybe just afraid, or don't know yet, or for whatever reasons have some blocks around empathy, how do you work with them? Where do you start?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because on the whole, and maybe I live in a bubble, right? But our reach is definitely reaching. So we're reaching some big numbers now. And I would say on the whole, I don't come across many of them one-on-one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's because when I present this, and this is why, I said earlier, I get up every day to create some form of content, whether that's a keynote or a radio interview or whatever it is. I hope, right? But I think that I speak about this in a way that is so easy to understand, and it kind of makes sense, right? There's not many people that can argue against the type of things that you and I are saying right now.
Empathy.
Is it better to say good morning and make eye contact? Yeah. Do you mean there's not many people that are going to say that is a terrible idea, right? So on the whole, I don't meet that many naysayers, I would say, kind of in general life. In the workplace, for sure, you're going to find people that come to these keynotes or sessions or whatever podcasts who think, "Ugh, this is a soft skill. It's something nice, and I don't need to be nice. There's no place for niceness in the workplace," that type of thing. For those people, particularly in the corporate world, we use a lot of data. I use a lot of data. So, for example, one of my favorite ones is that empathetic organizations have 23% higher profit. And I lead with that often early on when I feel like the audience needs to hear it, because immediately it's amazing. You see the phones come up. Like if you imagine an audience and you're on the stage
taking pictures of slides,
and you put the slide up behind you that says 23% higher profit, and the entire audience is like all these phone screens, right? So they love that. And I have lots of other data points around 68% higher levels of engagement, 17% higher levels of efficiency, 48% higher levels of innovation. There's so many, right? And I use a lot of Gallup data, because Gallup, whilst they probably are quite pro-empathy, but they're also just pro-engagement in the workplace. So lots of their data, which has really great data sets, very American data, but also global, really supports me when I have those, let's say, naysayers in the corporate world that are like, "Why do I need to do this?" There's no end to my ability to tell you why you do need it, right? And there's no end, right? You definitely need it. And then I would just say, because we're talking about the States, and I don't engage with it very well, but I know, because it's rising in its smallness, there is a group or some groups of people, I feel like, particularly in the USA, who are actually anti-empathy, right? Which is really interesting because in this part of the world, we don't hear or see that ever. But in the last few months, a couple of people have sent me these quite extreme articles that I would not come up in my, my algorithm. My feed is not going to give me these links because I'm not geographically or socially connected to these groups, where people are actually making videos on TikTok and stuff saying, empathy is like evil. This is this awful thing in the world. And I remember when I saw the first one, I was like, am I watching this right? Like, where is this? I could never imagine that anybody could have such an opinion on connecting with another human. Like, how can that be a problem? But then I started to understand, as I try not to watch them too much, but, to understand, to empathize with them. Why do they think this? What is it, to your word, you just said earlier, what are they scared of? What is it that they feel that this skill set is going to do that they don't like? And of course, you can empathize with that too and start to understand, well, actually, their understanding of this skill set is probably not my understanding of the skill set.
Sure.
And I think, hopefully that message won't rise too fast. I think it came out on the back of something that Elon Musk had said maybe in January or February. He had a headline in an American publication that said that empathy was the enemy of modern civilization or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Some rhetoric. But to be honest, I think it's the minority. And I think, the media loves a dramatic headline. And that was a dramatic headline. But on the whole, and I do lots of cross-cultural work. So if you look at my Instagram feed, you'll see me in many different cultures around the world and many different cultural clothes from around the world. Whoever I speak to, however big the audience, they tend to follow. That doesn't mean that they practice it when they leave. But in the room, for the time that they're in the room, they will follow. They'll say, yeah, that as a human, I feel, I believe, I sense what this woman is saying makes sense. It's very hard to not believe that we should be more connected as people. So yes, I'm quite optimistic. The momentum is generally good.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That gives us hope.
Yes,
for sure.
Lots of hope.
Well, what do you hope to see in the future? Speaking of hope. So if your movement works, you reach your goal,
Yes.
all the data rises, what do you expect to see on the other side of it? In leadership, specifically in the corporate world?
Yeah. Look, I think it's less of a kind of a dream and more of a reality because I think it's already changing. Having said that, I think in our lifetime, we'll never see the gaps filled. There's just not enough years. Even if you and I both live to be 120, there's still not enough years in those years to see what I would really love to see, in terms of those really reconnected societies. I also think that in reality, the stresses on our world will never go away. And as I said earlier, in high stress environments, there's always an absence of empathy. So what I'm thinking of in my mind right now is war. There has always been war. There will always be war. That's unfortunately part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And in those environments, there is no empathy. Because if I'm blowing up your town, I have no empathy for the fact that I'm blowing up your town, right? So I think in some ways there are gaps that I would love to see filled that never will when it comes to things like peacekeeping and cohesion of societies and communities. But why I say I think it's less of a dream and more of a reality is that the fact that you and I are talking right now, as we said earlier, across a 15-hour time zone, across so many things that could have kept us apart, right, was a shared belief from your side. When my team reached out, you obviously looked at who this person, Mimi, was and thought, yeah, like I'll speak to her. I think that's a resonant thing to have a conversation about.
Definitely resonant topic.
Yes, and the fact that I'm so I don't know, busy with it, and that wasn't the case, Elena. When I look at 2018, when I go back to that time with the coach and I met her, we ended up from that time taking on this mission. All right, I turned around that business. It was a very happy ending. I think that, when I started, I still feel quite alone, but I was extremely alone. I probably had maybe 300 connections on LinkedIn. And in the first quarter of this year, which is about 5 years later, we had about 1.9 million impressions on that basically same content. right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
nothing's really changed. I don't really change. I mean, maybe my hair color does, but other than that, the message is exactly the same. And the
Yeah.
fact that now we can reach 2 million people in 3 months from what was 300. And I just used to post into a void, right? I just posted every day and nobody answered, and that was fine. But today they do answer. Today I meet people like you. Today I get invited to stages with Bill Gates. And last week I did an interview for the Times of India, which is one of the world's largest newspapers. And all these amazing things happen. That is empathy. That is the empathy rising. So that's why I say it's not really so much of like I dream it to be, more I am watching it to become, because it's
Beautifully
happening.
said.
It's happening. It's amazing to me that every morning I wake up and there's total strangers in my inbox, or one of my social platforms, who are new people to me, who are interested. I didn't make them be interested; they became interested. So I think it's definitely happening. I think there's a rising awareness, a rising demand, a rising interest in why we need to be connected and what that does for us as businesses. Of course, I said earlier, 23% higher profits. You're going to make money, but you're also going to make people better. And the COVID discussion helped in that way. In the last 5 years, we have a far higher awareness of mental well-being, of emotional well-being, of the need for more inclusive workplaces. All of these types of things have shifted. So yeah, it's happening, Elena. We're in it, and we just have to slow down enough to notice it, because I think sometimes when you're in the core of that vortex, you don't stop to really reflect. And so, even this interview, I said it's very recent, it came out last night, this Times of India interview. Have I really sat down? I haven't even watched it. Do you know what I mean? It's only, I think, 15 minutes. I haven't watched myself. I haven't stopped yet to be like, I did this interview. It's in the world. How did I do? How do you mean? How were my answers? I just haven't had time, But if we don't stop to reflect on those moments, they get lost. They get lost in all the other moments, So I think we have to try and be very intentional and very conscious of how these coaching skills, these empathy skills are impacting lives, just to give us the energy to carry on, really.
Oh, I love that. And I hope you'll celebrate more than anything. Celebrate the achievement and go watch
Yes,
that 15-minute video.
I know, right? That's the thing. You have to celebrate. And it's, like I said, it's very hard to slow down because I get on the plane again soon. And I just got off the plane. I'm getting on another one tomorrow. So to find the time, I think also as mums, we have so many wonderful parts of our lives that we have to integrate into that. To celebrate yourself becomes, I don't know, lower down the list because you're busy celebrating everybody else,
Yeah, I get that. Well, you are such a joy. Thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing all your wisdom and your insight and your vision for the world and your advice moving forward, just how we can even get started. So if people want to connect with you, where should they find you?
So they can find me at Mimi Nicklin. My name, I think, is on the screen. On any platform, I'm most active on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, or via my website, which is www.empathyeverywhere.co, or on Amazon, because all my books are on there, and my brand new book comes out in the US in August. And that one is called The Connection Prescription. So there'll be a new piece of content out in the summer.
I love that. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being here with us. And thanks for sharing all your joy and your empathy.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If this conversation sparked something for you, let it move through your week. Take it with you. Take on one small action to move the ball forward. And if you want to join our community of leaders who are daring to lead with courage and heart, you can find that at www.elenaarmijo.com or www.thec-suitecollective.com. I reserve a small number of complimentary 20-minute sessions for leaders who want clarity on what they need and insight into what is getting in the way. The practical next steps that create real movement and results in your leadership journey. So you can schedule a call through the link below. It's in the description. Like, subscribe. Thank you for listening, for showing up, and for doing the work of being human together.